بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today's lesson number 53 overall in our series, and it is lesson number 18 on the section on Al-Qadr and Ash-Shara, the decree and the legislation. So in the previous lesson we concluded our discussion of what comprises Tawheed, what is Tawheed, which is the foundation of Islam, and we established that Tawheed in the Quran and in the conveyance of the messengers it has three aspects, the first of which is not disputed. It is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, that Allah is singled out and unique in his actions, meaning here the actions of creating, of providing, of regulating, controlling, giving life, taking life, and so on and so forth, basically in the governance of his creation. So this is Tawheed of Rububiyyah. And then there is the Tawheed of his names and attributes, which means that he is described with names and attributes, but he is unique in those names and attributes in the sense that his attributes are perfect and no one shares with him. No one shares with him in the reality of his attributes or the perfection of his attributes. This is what we mean when we say that Allah is unique and singled out with his names and his attributes. It doesn't mean that Allah is the only one described with hearing and seeing and knowing and wisdom. It doesn't mean that. It means that what Allah is described with and named with, then the realities of those things, the reality of those attributes, that Allah is unique in those realities. No one shares with him. So no one has knowledge like his knowledge, or hearing like his hearing, or seeing like his seeing, or and so on and so forth to the end. And this includes all of his names and attributes. And so this is part and parcel of Tawheed. To affirm his names and attributes is part and parcel of Tawheed. And thirdly, and most importantly, is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, which is Allah's right to be worshipped alone. Allah being singled out with worship, and this is on behalf of the servants. These are our actions. Our actions are singled out, meaning our actions of worship are singled out and made only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how Tawheed is very clearly and evidently explained in the Quran. This is very apparent. And even a common person who doesn't have to be intelligent or learned, just a common person who reads the Quran and reflects upon the Quran can very clearly and evidently see that this is the Tawheed that the Quran came with. So we finished that discussion in the previous lesson, and we said that in today's lesson we are going to look at an incorrect understanding of Tawheed, which we generally find with the people of Kalam, the people of philosophy, the people of rhetoric, the people of speculation. And what we will notice, what we will find is, and this is why it's very important to have clear knowledge in these issues, is that these people, after having been misled, they use language or statements or phrases which on the surface appear to be truth and appear to resemble what the people of Tawheed and Sunnah, what they say. It appears to resemble. However, it is presented in general ambiguous ways. It's general and it's ambiguous. So you can't really see what do they really intend or mean by this. It's not clear. And because of that ambiguity, it allows them to convey a false meaning, but by way of a term or a phrase that appears on the surface to be actually correct. And so this is what we are going to study now and look at now. And we're going to compare and contrast this with what we've been covering in the previous lessons of the Tawheed, right? Tawheed in the Quran. So the next section or the next chapter, the Shaykh says, it's just a fasl, there's no title to it. But he says, وَبِهَذَا التَّقْرِيرِ عن أقسام التوحيد يتبين غلط عامة المتكلمين في مسمى التوحيد حيث جعلوه ثلاثة أنواع. He says, so from this understanding of Tawheed, this division of Tawheed that we have just looked at in what has preceded, it becomes clear the mistake that the generality of the people of Kalam, that they fell into regarding the meaning of Tawheed when they divided it into three categories, the following three categories, right? So, so what did they say, right? So this is where we need to pay attention. They said, so these are the three categories of Tawheed to the people of Kalam. So what do they say? They say, Al-awwal, anna Allah wahidun fi dhatihi la qasima lahu aw la juz'a lahu aw la ba'da lahu. Right, so this now is the first category that the people of Kalam claim is Tawheed, or is from Tawheed, or is, is the Tawheed of the messengers. So this is that Allah is one in His essence. Allah is one in His essence. And there is no divisibility, there's no division for Him. There's no divisibility. Nor is there any apart, like a separable part, like a juz or a ba'd, right? So this is one aspect of what they consider to be Tawheed, meaning that you consider Allah to be an indivisible being, right? He is one being who is indivisible. That's one of their three categories of Tawheed. The second one is that they say أنه واحد في صفاته لا شبيه له, that Allah is one in His attributes, there is none to resemble Him. Allah is one in His attributes, there is none to resemble Him. Now this appears to be very similar to what the people of Tawheed say, right? That Allah is, but what they mean by this is actually something different, right? So Allah is one in His attributes, there is none to resemble Him. And the third aspect or element of the Tawheed that they believe and they claim is they say أنه واحد في أفعاله لا شريك له, that Allah is one in His actions, there is no partner to Him. Allah is one in His actions, meaning no one shares with Allah in His actions, and there's no partner to Him. Now this one, we can clearly recognize. This basically is the same as what we would call Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, right? It's just a different way of saying it. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, which means Allah alone is the Lord, the Creator, the Provider, the Sustainer, which means Allah alone is unique in these actions, creating, providing, sustaining, controlling, regulating. So all they've done is they've said it in a slightly different way. Allah is one in His actions, there is no one who shares in His actions, which is true. Allah is the Creator, no one shares in His action of creating the heavens and the earth and other entities He brings into existence. So So these three then are the components of Tawheed to the people of Kalam, generally speaking, to the people of Kalam. And the Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, summarizing the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, is going to explain to us why this division or why this understanding of Tawheed is wrong, why this is incorrect. And straight away, as you can see, well, in fact, let's go straight in. The Shaykh says, وَبَيَانُ غَلَطِهِمْ مِنْ وُجُوهٍ. So the explanation of their mistake is from numerous angles, right? It's from numerous angles. The first one, أحدها أنهم لم يدخلوا فيه توحيد الألوهية. Right? So the very first and obvious, very clear mistake that we can see immediately in this division of Tawheed is that they have not entered into this understanding, Tawheed al-Uluhiyah. Right? So we cannot see here anywhere where it says from Tawheed is to single out Allah in worship. Right? As it relates to the actions of the servants. All of this is in relation to Allah and His essence and His attributes and His actions. There's nothing here to do with the actions of the servants and what we are supposed to do to single out Allah in worship. It's very obviously and blatantly absent, right, in this understanding. So he says, وَهُوَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَاحِدٌ فِي أُلُوهِيَّتِهِ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. So what is missing? It is that Allah the Exalted is one, is alone in His right to be worshipped, having no partners therein, such that He is singled out alone with worship. And this is despite the fact that in the Quran, as we said, very clearly and explicitly, Allah Azza wa Jal has stated that this is the actual purpose of creation. Right? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created man and jinn except that they may worship me, meaning worship me alone. So this is the clear, obvious purpose of creation, yet in their explanation or understanding of Tawheed, the people of Kalam have not entered what is the actual very purpose and the reason for our existence. It's not even there in the Tawheed that they present and that they, have understood. And likewise, more clearly, it was for this very reason that Allah Azza wa Jal sent the prophets and the messengers, and for which He sent down the books. And the Shaykh mentions numerous verses that we are very familiar with. The same to Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدُونَ. Never did we send, we did not send any messenger before you, except that we inspired him to say, there is none which has the right to be worshipped except I, so worship me alone. 21 verse 25. And also the other famous verse, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. We indeed sent or raised within every nation a messenger saying, worship Allah alone and shun false deities or false gods. And we find also that when Allah mentions the stories of each of the messengers and prophets, He mentions what was the first thing that they said to their people. What did they say? They said, أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. Worship Allah alone, you have no other God besides Him. Right? Meaning there's no other deity or God who is worthy of worship, who deserves to be worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they did have many other gods that they were worshipping. But the only one that deserves to be worshipped and is worshipped in truth is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also Allah made it clear in the Quran that whatever is worshipped besides Him is batil, these are false deities, false gods. So He said, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْحَقِّ وَأَنَّمَا يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ الْبَاطِلِ. This is because because Allah, He is the truth, and that which they invoke besides Him is false, is falsehood. And that Allah, وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْكَبِيرُ, and that Allah is the mighty, the great. Right? That's Surah Luqman, Surah 31, verse 30. So worshipping Allah alone is the actual purpose of our creation, firstly. Secondly, it's the actual thing that the prophets and messengers were sent for and the books were revealed for. Thirdly, it was on account of this actual issue of singling out Allah for worship for which battles were fought. Right? Battles in terms of speech and in terms of physically, they were fought. Between who? Between the messengers and their followers and the people to whom they were sent. Right? So the actual battles were fought on this very issue of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And despite all of these things, we do not even find it in the definition or classification of their understanding of Tawheed. Right, so as the Shaykh says, وَمِنْ أَجْلِهِ قامت المعارك الكلامية والقتالية بين الرسل وأقوامهم المكذبين لهم. Right, so on account of this were battles fought, whether verbal, whether in terms of physical, in terms of fighting, between the messengers and their people who rejected them. As Allah says, and then the Shaykh goes on to give numerous examples from the various messengers. So with relation to Nuh alayhi salam, he said that the people of Nuh said, قالوا يا نوح قد جادلتنا فأكثرت جدالنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. O Nuh, you've argued with us a great deal. You've argued with us and you've argued a great deal. So bring to us that which you are promising if indeed you are truthful. Meaning, bring forth this punishment you keep telling us about. If you're really truthful, then bring it upon us then. Which shows, as the Shaykh explains, that clearly we see that for a long time, Nuh alayhi salam, he engaged in argument, debate with them. So this is a battle which is verbal, right? By way of jidal, by way of arguing, presenting to them the arguments for Tawheed and invalidation of shirk, and showing why what they are worshipping of these dead people and idols and statues, that this is all false and vain. So after that stage, then they began to challenge him and say, okay, then bring us the punishment then. And so this shows the stages in which he called. Likewise, the Shaykh mentions Hud alayhi salam, and Hud is among the prophets and messengers who were sent between the time of Noah and Ibrahim, meaning he was before Abraham. And Allah says in the Quran, again quoting the people of Hud, they said, قالوا يا هود ما جئتنا ببينة وما نحن بتاركي آلهتنا عن قولك وما نحن لك بمؤمنين. So basically they said, O Hud, you have not brought any clear evidence to us. We haven't seen any clear evidence. And we are not going to abandon our gods just for your speech and for your statement, nor are we going to believe you. And what we say is, it looks like that we believe that our gods, it looks like they have afflicted you with some evil. Meaning that the reason why you're speaking with all of this speech, telling us to leave our gods and to worship Allah alone, it looks like you've gone mad and insane. And maybe this is our gods who've afflicted you with a punishment and made you lose your mind and make you say what you are saying. Maybe this is what's happened to you. But we're not leaving our gods, we're not abandoning our gods. And so Hud said to them, قال إني أشهد الله واشهدوا أني بريء مما تشركون. So he said, indeed I call Allah as a witness, and I call you to witness too, that I am free and innocent from that which you worship besides Allah. alongside Allah, which you commit partners with him. And min dunihi, besides him. فَكِيدُونِي جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ لَا تُنظِرُونَ. So he said, so plot all of you together, come together all of you and plot against me, and do not give me any respite, do not wait. And to the end of what he said. So meaning here, what is this happening? This is a battle, verbal, and then challenge from Hud alayhi salam to his people, to inflict him with whatever they wish, that they will not be able to do so, because he relies upon Allah, he believes upon Allah, to the end. The point being, this is a battle between Hud and his people. The same thing with Ibrahim alayhi salam and his people. His people were star worshippers, they would erect idols, and there were people of astronomy and calculations and things like that. They believed that the stars, their motion and their position, during certain times of the month, that they influence the events upon the earth, and that the stars and the planets, they are inhabited by spirits or by spiritual beings, and so they had this system of worship built around all of this. So he invited them, he called them, and he said to them, قَالَ أَتَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَنْفَعُكُمْ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَضُرُّكُمْ. Do you worship besides Allah what does not benefit you in anything and not harm you? أُفٍّ لَكُمْ, woe be to you. And وَلِمَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, and whatever you worship besides Allah. Will you not, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, will you not reason and display some intellect? So then what did they say? They said, قَالُوا حَرِّقُوهُ وَانْصُرُوا آلِهَتَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ فَاعِلِينَ. They said, burn him and aid the cause of your gods if you will do so. So Allah said, قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كُونِي بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. So we said, O fire, be cool and a means of peace for Ibrahim alayhi salam. So as the Shaykh goes on to explain, what happened is these people, they built a huge, massive fire. It was so big and so ferocious that that when they wanted to throw Ibrahim into the fire, they couldn't do so. They had to create basically what's like, as the Shaykh explains, basically like a catapult, right, which they placed him in, and they fired it so he would be thrown into the fire from a distance because it was so hot and so ferocious. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He, because He is the creator of all the ways and the means, He made the fire to change its properties, and it was peaceful and it was cool, and as the Shaykh says, it was as if Ibrahim alayhi salam was walking in a like a green garden of it's cool. There's nothing nothing there for him to be harmed with. And the Shaykh goes on to say that this is evidence that things are not like what the naturalists and the atheists claim, right? Who have been present for a long while. Because what do they say? They say that all things are tabi'iyyah, right? That they have an inherent nature that they do not change. These are their inherent qualities and properties. So water has qualities, properties, fire has qualities and properties. This is just the way of all things. This is just nature. And so what they don't understand or what they don't accept is that the nature of a thing has been given to it by something else. And that nature of that thing is not actually fixed. Allah can change it if He wishes. So if He wants the fire to be cool, He can make the fire to be cool. And He can change the properties of anything and everything to make it other than what it is. And in fact, even we see from ourselves within the things that we study, we can see that even one thing has so many different properties that it can be made to do opposite things. Like we could take the air, for example, oxygen, for example. We could take the water, for example. And depending on either extreme heat or extreme cold or different circumstances, we see that the properties of these things actually change, and often they become the exact opposites of each other, even though it's the one and the same substance, right? So whoever does chemistry or physics and things like that will clearly understand this. So if this is the case, that the properties of things can be altered in this way, then obviously Allah is the one who gave everything its property or properties, and He can dispose of it however He wills. And this is a refutation of the naturalists and the atheists, who believe only in nature, that somehow, and really they are pantheists and polytheists, pantheists, because they effectively believe that nature is God. Nature is God, right? That's really what they are saying in a roundabout way. However, nature, the word tabi'ah, implies that the nature of a thing has been granted to it by something else. Anyhow, moving on, the point was that they tried to kill Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they were unable to do so, but that was the point of battle, right? So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he debated with them, argued with them, reasoned with them verbally, and then they tried to fight him, tried to kill him, tried to destroy him. So this is a battle on the basis of what? On the basis of Tawheed and singling out Allah in worship. Not whether there is a creator and whether He's one in His essence and whether He's the only one who creates and provides and sustains. No, this wasn't a battle. And likewise He said about those who reject Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He said, وقال عن المكذبين لمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإذا رآك الذين كفروا إن يتخذونك إلا هزوا هذا الذي he says هذا الذي يذكر آلهتكم. When those who disbelieve, when they see you, they take you in jest, right? They take you in jest. And they say, what do they say? Is this the one who mentions your gods? Is he the one who's mentioning your gods, meaning with evil and disparagement and things like that? So here, and then also we see in Surah Sad, at the beginning of Surah Sad as well, where Allah says about the pagans of Mecca, وَعَجِبُوا أَنْ جَاءَهُمْ مُنذِرٌ مِّنْهُمْ وَقَالَ الْكَافِرُونَ هَذَا سَاحِرٌ كَذَّابٌ. Right, so they are surprised and amazed that a warner has come to them from amongst themselves. And the disbeliever said, this is a lying magician. He is a liar and he's a magician. أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. Has he made all of the gods into a single God? Did he turn all the gods into just one God that we are supposed to worship? إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. This is something strange. This is something strange. And then Allah says, وَانْطَلَقَ الْمَلَأُ مِنْهُمْ أَنِمْشُوا وَاصْبِرُوا عَلَى آلِهَتِكُمْ إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ يُرَادٌ. So the chiefs of the disbelievers said, continue and have patience upon your gods. Indeed, this looks like this is some sort of conspiracy. This is some sort of plot or a conspiracy. And what they meant by that is, looks like this man Muhammad, he's simply trying to just simply gain power over you. He's trying to become the leader, the political leader, and gain power over you. So this is just his way of, doing this. So again, we see very clearly here that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, his dispute and argumentation was in relation to idol worship and idolatry and the worship of others besides Allah, whether it be idols, whether it be angels, whether it be jinn, whether it be righteous men, whether it be stones, trees, sun, moon, stars, whatever it might be, anything besides Allah. This was the point of dispute, as we see very, very clearly. And ultimately, at the end of all of that, when he conquered Mecca in the month of Ramadan, and he went to the Kaaba and found 360 idols, and so he began to destroy them with his hand and beat them and strike them. And as he was doing and saying that, he was reciting the verses in the Quran, وَجَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Indeed, truth has come and falsehood has perished. Indeed, falsehood is ever, perishing. So once again, what do we see? The battle is Tawheed and Shirk, meaning Allah's right to be worshipped alone. It wasn't the pagans somehow contending and disputing whether there is a creator and whether that Lord and creator is unique in his actions of creation. No, this was never the dispute. The Shaykh goes on to mention some other verses from the Quran in Surah Al-Mumtahina, again regarding the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إن يثقفوكم يكونوا لكم أعداء ويبسطوا إليكم أيديهم وألسنتهم بسوء وودوا لو تكفرون. If they, meaning the pagans, were to dominate you, then they would become enemies to you, and they would try to reach you with harm by their tongues and by their hands, and they wish that you disbelieve. This indicates the intent of the people of disbelief, that they want to, with their tongues and with their hands, to harm you, to so on and so forth. And also the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَقَاتِلُوهُمْ حَتَّى لَا يَكُونَ فِتْنَةً. So fight them until there is no more tribulation. So all of these verses that we've looked at, and these are just some examples from previous nations and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what does it all show, and what does it clearly prove? It shows that the point of dispute and the point of argumentation was on the issue of Tawheed, as the Shaykh says, وَالْمُحِمْ أن هذا التوحيد الذي هذا شأنه قد أغفله عامة المتكلمين الذين يتكلمون في أنواع التوحيد وهو أحد وجوه غلطهم في مسمى التوحيد. So the point being that this Tawheed that we've just discussed, and was the point of battle between the prophets and messengers, and which the messengers called to, and which the Quran was revealed for, and for which mankind was created. These people, the mutakallimin, the people of kalam, they, who spoke about the types of tawheed, they neglected this. How come they didn't even mention this? It's not even there. And this is one of their many angles from which they made mistakes in tawheed. So they made numerous mistakes. This is just one of them, right? There's others that we will see as well, that they did not include the greatest issue of Allah's right to be worshipped alone. Anyhow, this is the first of 4 angles from which they fell into a mistake. Now the second angle, Shaykh goes on to say, Al-Wajhu Thani, قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ فِي ذَاتِهِ لَا قَسِيمَ لَهُ, to the end. Okay, so what did they say as part of Tawheed? The first of their 3 aspects, they said, indeed Allah is one, He does not have any division nor any parts. Okay, now this is very ambiguous. What do you mean by this? Very ambiguous. So they could mean a number of different things. It depends what you mean. So if you mean فإن أرادوا به أن الله تعالى لا يتجزأ ولا يتفرق ولا يكون مركبا من أجزاء فهذا حق. If you mean by this that Allah is, He doesn't separate into parts or become divisible, and that He is not composed, then this is obviously true. This is true. Nobody believes otherwise. Right? That Allah, فإن الله تعالى أحد صمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Right? So this is what Surah Al-Ikhlas, what it establishes, that Allah is one, and He wasn't given birth to, nor did He give birth. This means that Allah in His essence is one being. Unlike us, we are, it is possible for us, for a man, for example, to lose something from his body. He could lose an organ, he could lose a limb, he could lose, whatever it might be. So he's now become divisible, right? So Allah is unlike that. And so nobody disputes this. And if this is what you mean, Allah is one in His essence, indivisible, then this is a true and correct meaning. It was a true and correct meaning. However, did the polytheists, and did any of the people to whom the prophets and messengers were sent, did they contend this? Were they arguing about this? Was this like an issue? No, right? So, so this isn't, this isn't the main issue. However, if they mean by this that, if what they mean by this, that they are trying to negate some of his attributes, like the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is above his creation, so he's above his creation, or that he ascended above his throne, or that he has attributes such as like a face and hands, like he clearly said in the Quran. If what you mean by saying Allah is one and is not divisible, if you mean by that the negation of the attributes that he affirmed for himself, then this is clearly false. And this is clearly what they mean. This is what they mean to say, right? When they say, we believe Allah is one, and he's not divisible, and he doesn't have any parts, they mean to say that Allah does not have a face. Allah did not ascend above his throne. Why do they say that? Because they have wrong presumptions. Just because Allah has face and hands does not mean that these are limbs like they are for us, right? So our attributes are limbs and they are parts because they are actually divisible. They can be separated from us. But the attributes of Allah are not like that. So we cannot say that Allah's attributes are like limbs. We don't say that. This is what the people of Kalam, that's what they say. Why? Because they assume in their minds that somehow Allah's face and the face of the creation must be identical, must be the same. So therefore we have to reject that Allah has what he described himself with. This is not true, right? So, but this is what they mean. When they say Allah is one and is indivisible and has no parts, you don't find this language anywhere really. I mean, yes, it's true. Surah Ikhlas has come with this meaning, that Allah is one. He's not given birth to, so he's not a part of something, nor does something become a part of him, like a son, for example. This is true, we believe that this is false. But what they mean is something other than that. They mean to deny and to negate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do we say? What do we believe? We say, well, we believe in the names and attributes of Allah in a way that is befitting for him, as we did in the previous lesson, if you remember, in Tawheed al-Asma'i wa Sifat. And we do that without tahrif and ta'til and takyif and tamthil. So we went through this previously in previous lessons, that this is our methodology in how we believe in the names and the attributes of Allah. So the point being, what do they mean by this first component or aspect of Tawheed that they claim? Allah is one, without any division and without any parts. There is a true meaning to it, which is Allah indeed in his essence, he is one and is indivisible. So for example, what the Christians say, that Isa alayhi salam is a part of God, and we know that's false. Or that Allah gave birth to him, right? Or that God was given birth to, that Jesus is God and he was given birth to. So therefore he is a part, right? This is clearly false. We don't believe that Allah is divisible in that way or in that sense, in the sense that Christians believe that. And in fact, this is why this chapter was revealed. It was revealed in refutation of the Christians, right? To prove that Allah is only one. If that's what you mean, we believe this is correct, this is true. But this is not what they mean. What they mean to say is, we can't say Allah is above his throne, because above is a direction, and a direction implies a location, and a location is a place. A place means occupying a space, and if you occupy a space, it means you're a body, and if you're a body, it means you are composed and divisible, right? So this is now the Aristotelian, the philosophy of Aristotle coming in which they are using to understand Tawheed. So therefore, because of Aristotelian philosophy, we can't say Allah is above his throne. This is what they mean. right? We can't say Allah ascended above his throne. We can't say Allah has a face or hands, just like how he described he has in the Quran, in a way that befits his majesty, right? So this is what they actually intend by way of this statement, which shows that this is a vague, ambiguous statement, right? The third angle, the third reason, third angle from which they are mistaken and in error is that, what did they say? They said, قَوْلُهُمْ وَاحِدٌ فِي صِفَاتِهِ لَا شَبِيهَ لَهُ. Right, so this now is the second of the three. What did they say? They say that Allah is one in his attributes, there is none to resemble him. Again, there is ijmal, there is ambiguity and a generalization, right? So it depends now what you mean by what you say, because on the surface it seems like it's the same as what we're saying, that Allah is one in his attributes, there is none to resemble him. So it depends, like if you mean, they can mean one of a number of things, one of maybe three things, right? So if you mean that you affirm the attributes of Allah that are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah in a way that befits his majesty without resembling anything from the creation, then this is true. If this is what you mean. If you mean Allah, yes, Allah has mercy, he has power and knowledge and hearing and seeing and a face and hands and other attributes he mentioned, but they do not resemble those of the creation. They're not like our attributes, but he has them, and we do not know the realities of these attributes, and he is unique in these attributes in the sense that they are perfect attributes without flaws, without things like that. If that's what you mean, then this is true, and this is the way of the Salaf, the way of the Salaf. But obviously we know that they don't intend this. This is not what they intend, right? But this would be the first interpretation of this statement. Allah is one in his attributes without any resemblance, right? The second thing that they could intend, or mean, is that they could be saying, by this that there is nothing from within the creation that is a likeness to Allah from every single angle, right? In other words, what you intend by this statement is to say there is nothing besides Allah in his creation which is a likeness to Allah from every single angle, right? But really, to say this is vain and futile speech, right? There is no reason or purpose for you to even make this type of speech. Why? Because it's like what you're saying is we do not believe in a second Allah. This is what you're saying, right? Because this is pointless. Like, you don't need to. Nobody believes there is Allah and then there is another Allah who is like Allah in every single, because nobody believes this to begin with, right? Nobody believes such a thing for you to say, we believe Allah is one in his attributes, there's nothing to resemble him, who resembles him in everything of his attributes, meaning he's just like him, because nobody believes this to begin with anyway, right? There is no one or no thing that resembles Allah with a resemblance or with a likeness from every single angle, right? Because this is something that's agreed upon by reason, necessity of reason, by revelation, by consensus of all of the intelligent people, and we do not know of anyone from this creation who ever affirmed and believed such a thing, right? That there is another Lord alongside Allah. Nobody believed this, right? So just like nobody, as we discussed previously, nobody believed or nobody denied or rejected a supreme creator, right? In the whole of creation history, nobody really denied that there is an eternal being, supreme, whatever. Not even Fir'aun, not even Nimrod. In the same way, nobody believed that there is a Lord and Creator and then there's another Lord and Creator, who resembles him or is like him from every single angle, right? So therefore, what you are doing is you are saying a statement which is just totally unnecessary and redundant, because there is absolutely no need to even make or to state such a thing, right? It doesn't make any sense to even say such a thing. So anyhow, this would be the second thing that they might intend by this statement, which, as we know, there's no point in saying this, because nobody's even disputing with you about like if that's what you mean, right? But the third thing that they could mean also, and this is what they actually mean, is they mean to say that this goes back to something we discussed previously. What they mean to say is they're trying to deny the shared meaning between Allah's attributes and our attributes, right? So what they're trying to deny is the fact that when we say, for example, power, when we say the word power, then we can all understand something like a general meaning, which we know, we clearly understand what power means, and that this meaning is shared between Allah and the creation, right? This has to be the case, because if this wasn't the case, then we would never be able to understand anything about Allah, right? So when we use words like power, we all understand what power means, right? There's a general meaning to power, right? However, when we say the power of Allah, then that power now takes on a very specific kayfiyah. It has a specific reality which we don't really know how it is. And when we say the power of a man, and we tie it to a man, or the power of the wind, and we tie it to the wind, or the power of water, or the power of fire, right, or the power of whatever it might be, we are now restricting and specifying that power as having a specific form that is unique to the thing that we are ascribing it to, right? So there is a shared general concept and meaning which has to be shared between the creator and the created, because otherwise we would never be able to have any knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This absolutely has to be the case. And this is the only way we are able to understand the Quran. When the Quran says that Allah is all-knowing and has knowledge, is all-merciful and has mercy, is all-powerful and has power, and is forgiving, and so on and so forth, we understand the meanings of these words, right? Which shows that there has to be a resemblance in the meaning as opposed to resemblance in the reality, right? So Allah's power, how it is unlike our power. Allah's knowledge, likewise those other attributes, Allah's face, Allah's hands, they are unlike our attributes, right? But in terms of the general meaning, we can understand and we can grasp the meanings of those attributes. So what they mean when they say Allah is one in His attributes, there is nothing to resemble them. What they are really saying here is they are trying to negate that there can be even any resemblance in the meaning, in the foundational meaning, right? So if you think carefully, this position is really conveying the position of tafweed, right? That we don't know the meanings of what the attributes mean. Allah knows best what they mean, right? But right? So they're trying to negate that there are actual meanings. Or it could be like the way of the Mu'tazila, who say Allah has no attributes, right? So it goes in the direction of that deviation. Whereas this is pure negation of Allah's attributes. If you deny this, if you deny that when we say Allah's knowledge, power, wisdom, hearing, seeing, speech, life, right, that we all understand from these words a basic meaning, right, if you deny that this can be applied to Allah and to His creation, then basically you are denying everything that Allah has described Himself with. You are negating all of Allah's attributes, right? And this is what they actually intend by way of this. So the point being that what we say is there absolutely has to be a shared meaning, right? If we say Allah exists and we exist, it does not mean that we have made our existence to be like Allah's existence. But we all understand the word existence and what it means. We ascribe it to Allah, we ascribe it to ourselves. Allah exists, we exist. But nobody has said the existences are the same in the actual reality. So what do we say? We say we absolutely believe that there is something that we call al-qadar al-mushtarak. Al-qadar al-mushtarak. This means that, for example, everything which exists has a shared meaning of existence. Is that not true? Everything. Allah exists, the angels exist, the prophets exist, the messengers exist, the books exist, paradise exists, hellfire exists, right? All are sharing the attribute of existence, right? And likewise, everything which can see has seeing. Has seeing. Everything which can hear has hearing, right? So there has to be a qadar mushtarak, meaning something shared in terms of the meaning. But then, as it relates to the reality, when we ascribe it to a specific thing, it takes on its unique and specific reality, right? So we discussed this previously. So when we affirm this and when we believe in this, what we just said, this in no way does it mean that, that if we affirm something for Allah, it means that we are likening it to the creation. Not at all, or that it necessitates tashbih or whatever. This does not follow at all. And this is something that we covered previously in detail in the previous lessons. So you should be familiar with this, with this understanding. Anyhow, the Shaykh goes on to say that this is the way of the people of the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, and they are the ones who make these negations. They are the ones who say that whoever affirms for Allah an attribute or a name, then he is a mushabbih. He is likening Allah or resembling Allah to His creation. And then some of them, they go to extremes and they say, well, whoever affirms for Allah a name, let alone an attribute, a name as well, he likewise is a mushabbih, he resembles Allah. And some of them go even further and they say, well, whoever makes a negation for Allah or an affirmation for Allah, affirmation or negation. So you can't say Allah is all hearing, and you can't say Allah is not deaf. You can't say either, right? So they go to different extremes as to how they apply this principle. Anyhow, this is the third mistake. This is the third mistake, right? What was the first mistake in the definition of Tawheed? There's no uluhiyya. No uluhiyya. Second mistake, what was that? They said Allah is one, He's not divisible. Allah is one, not divisible. What's the mistake here? This is a vague general statement. What do you mean by this? Do you mean divisible like what the Christians say? That Jesus is God and Allah is God and Jesus is a part of God? Well, this is false. We don't believe in that. Or do you mean to say Allah doesn't have the attributes which He ascribed to Himself in the Quran and the Sunnah, which you wrongly claim are parts and, well, that's false. The third point is, they said Allah is one in His attributes, nothing resembles Him. What do you mean by this? You could mean one of three things, right? So that was the third thing. And the fourth mistake, when they say Allah, this is the third part of that definition, قَوْلُهُمْ وَاحِدٌ فِي أَفْعَالِهِ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. This is the third one, right? Allah is one, there is no partner to Him. And what is this? This is what to them, what is the great, is Tawheed to them, right? This is the major part of what is Tawheed to them. That Allah is one no one shares with him in his actions. This is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah to us, right? So whereas to us, Tawheed, the greatest Tawheed is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, to single out Allah in worship, right? Which is the actions of the servants being directed to Allah and worshipping Allah alone. To them, the greatest part of Tawheed, what is like the essence of Tawheed to them? It's this Tawheed here, right? Which is Allah is one in his actions, there's no one to resemble him. Meaning, only Allah is the creator. Only Allah has the power and the ability to create something and to bring about something. And they think that this is the Tawheed that the prophets and messengers came with, and which they basically called to, right? And then they have certain arguments, they bring certain arguments. And this is a mistake. Why is this a mistake? The Shaykh goes on to mention there's two angles of how and why this is a mistake. The first is that this thing you are saying is Tawheed was actually affirmed and believed in by the pagan Arabs to begin with. They don't even deny that Allah is the Lord, the Creator, the Provider, the Sustainer. And the Shaykh goes on to mention a number of verses which you are familiar with. We covered this previously, in which Allah says to the Messenger of Allah, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ فَأَنَّا يُؤْفَكُونَ. If you were to ask them, who created the heavens and the earth, and who subjected the sun and the moon, they will surely say Allah. Say, how then do you fabricate lies? وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. If you ask them who created them, they will surely say Allah, right? So there are many verses like this. We know that the pagan Arabs did not deny that Allah is the Creator, Provider, Sustainer, sends down rain, regulates all the affairs, is Lord of the throne. No, they did not deny this. What did they deny? أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. This is what the fight was. Have you made all of the gods that we worship and serve and give devotion to, have you now just made all of that into just one God that we should worship and serve, to whom we should direct our invocation, supplication, seeking refuge, seeking protection, seeking aid? Is that what you're telling us? This was a dispute, right? So this is the first angle or the first mistake that they make. And secondly, the mistake here is that they are basically saying the meaning of La ilaha illallah is La khaliqa illallah. Right? There's no creator besides Allah. This is their interpretation of the kalima La ilaha illallah upon this third aspect of their tawheed. And this is not true. So they say an ilah, a God, is whatever has the power and the ability to create. But this is not the meaning of ilah. Right? Ilah, the meaning of ilah is ma'luh, ma'bud, meaning something to which devotion and worship is shown. This is the meaning of ilah. It is ma'bud, ma'luh, something to which devotion and worship is shown and directed. Right? But they said ilah means that which has the ability to create. This is not true. This would mean that the meaning of La ilaha illallah means that there is no creator besides Allah. But no one's disputing that. The pagan Arabs did not dispute that. So how can this be the Tawheed, right? So the Shaykh goes on after clarifying this, that this is a false understanding, and the evidence against this from the many evidences is the fact that Allah said, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا إِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ وَيَقُولُونَ أَإِنَّا لَتَارِكُوا آلِهَتِنَا لِشَاعِرٍ مَجْنُونَ. Right? What's the clear evidence to refute this? In the Quran, Allah says about them, indeed, when it would be said to them La ilaha illallah, they would become arrogant. They would become arrogant. And they would say, are we going to abandon our gods for some mad poet? Right? So think about it. Think about it. Why would the pagan Arabs become arrogant? Why would it be, why, if the dispute was about whether Allah alone is the creator and the provider, why would they become arrogant, right? So for example, imagine the situation, the pagan Arabs, if the dispute was whether Allah alone creates, and the messenger said to them, La ilaha illallah, right? So they become arrogant. Why did they become arrogant? Is it because they were believing that their gods and their idols create alongside Allah? Is that why they became arrogant? Does it make sense to become arrogant on that ground? Oh, you're telling us that only Allah is the creator, but we can't accept that because, our idols create and they provide and they heal and they guide. And so is that the point of dispute? Is that why they became arrogant? Of course it isn't. Because they clearly said, وَيَقُولُونَ أَإِنَّا لَتَارِكُ آلِهَتَنَا لِشَاعِرٍ مَجْنُونٍ. Are we going to abandon our gods for some mad poet? Meaning that we don't want to give up the worship of these idols and gods and making offerings to them and seeking rescue from them and invoking them and seeking intercessions. We don't want to give that up, right? So it means, and obviously other verses clearly say that they believed Allah is the creator, maker, whatever. So this is clear proof that this cannot be the meaning of La ilaha illallah. Obvious and very apparent. So what they were arrogant was in relation to uluhiyyah. And then finally, just to really quickly summarize where we come to at the end of all of this, that in essence, when you consider all of this, what then is Tawheed to the people of Kalam? What is Tawheed to the people of Kalam? Tawheed is actually the Tawheed of the pagans of Mecca. That's the essence of Tawheed to them. That what the pagans of Mecca used to believe in, Allah is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, He alone is the creator. Well, you haven't gone beyond that Tawheed, and you haven't even touched the Tawheed of the messengers, right? And that's the nature of your Tawheed, and which means that this does not free a person from shirk. Like you are not inviting people to abandon shirk by this deficient understanding of Tawheed. And the Shaykh goes on to say, in fact, what we can do, because this is the Tawheed of many of the Sufis. To them, Tawheed is just believing Allah is one. And because of that faulty understanding, it leads them to fall into great mistakes in the affair of Tawheed, and it leads them to fall into evil doctrines. And inshallah, the connection between this understanding of Tawheed and what the Sufis fell into, why they fell into it, we'll discuss this in the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. So this brings us to the end of this particular section of this chapter. In essence, you should be able to see the deficiency and the limitations in this understanding of Tawheed. It is not the Tawheed that the messengers came with. The various elements they describe, there's ambiguity, we don't know what you mean. It's stated in general terms, you could mean something true, you could mean something false. Glaringly, there is no uluhiyyah in this understanding of Tawheed. And the Tawheed to you, which you've made to be Tawheed, is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, that there is only one creator, right? And this, the pagan Arabs did not even deny this, right? So when you make this to be the foundation of Islam, so remember, what's the wider discussion? What's the wider context? We said there is al-Qadr, there is ash-Shara, right? There's the decree, there's the legislation. There's no contradiction between the two of them. And the legislation, what is the foundation of legislation? It is Islam. What is Islam? There's the general Islam of all the prophets and messengers. Then there is the specific Islam, which is this Sharia. What's the foundation of all of that? It is Tawheed. What is this Tawheed? This Tawheed is Rububiyyah as the foundation, which necessitates that we worship Allah alone. That's the call of the prophets and messengers. So you will see the call of the prophets and messengers. It guides people to single out Allah alone, and it rectifies the earth. But when you make Tawheed to be basically, Allah is just one and indivisible, and there's no creator besides Allah, and that's the limitations of your Tawheed, and you're not even calling people away from worship of other things besides Allah, right? Then where is this going to lead towards? Where is this going to lead towards, right? It's going to lead to a corruption in many different ways. It's going to lead also to a clash between the legislation and qadr. You see where this is going, right? You will be led to certain beliefs and certain ideas in which there will be a clash between al-qadr and al-shara, a contradiction, or where one is negated, right? The legislation is negated, right? So there's some like implications behind having a faulty understanding in the foundations of Tawheed, and it undermines all the things that we've discussed previously, right? So with that, we'll conclude today's lesson, and we'll continue this discussion insha'Allah ta'ala in the next lesson. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.